Hi there, I'm Brian. I'm going to walk you through swapping the dies front and back out on our newer model penny press machines here. There are a few different versions of the machine, a free play or a paid press. Some do have electronics in them, and some have a noisy clicker brake, some don't. Some also are 4-image and some are 5-image. So we'll go through some of those differences and what it takes to swap the dies in each machine. I'm going to start here. I have the press on the base and with the handle on, sign where everything's set up. So I'm going to take the handle off. That'll be our first step in swapping the dies. I have some tools laid out. We'll include in our instructions a tool list of what you'll need to swap the dies with. And most of those tools are required. Some are suggested just to make it a little bit easier. Like you'll notice I have a T-handled Allen wrench versus our standard Allen wrenches just for speed. So whichever you have would work just fine. Initially there I took our handle off. I took the 4 socket head handle bolts out. We'll just leave those items there. You'll notice there's a cone on our wheel style handle. It's a shorter cone. You'll take that off next. Be careful not to drop it. You don't want to dent that. You can set that aside. Now at this point, if it is a crank style handle like we just took off there, you'll take off this second hub using a 3/8 drive or a 3/8 Allen wrench. Again, I use the T-handles because it's quicker, but a regular Allen wrench works just fine. Take this hub off. There's a bolt inside of that. That could fall out if it does. Just make sure you reassemble it the way you see there and set that off to the side. Now at this point, there is still a spacer washer on here. Those are glued to the front window. If that does break loose when you take the machine out, just make sure you stack it back in there when you reassemble. But it is just stuck on with a little bit of spray adhesive. So, all right, now we'll take our back door off here. We'll access from the back side. Notice I have mine on a rolling cart, so it's real easy to move around. If yours is not, just work from either side as needed. Okay, so we'll take our 5/16 Allen wrench. Next, we're going to just remove this internal coin chute. If you haven't had that out before, there's just 2 Allen head bolts in the plate. The lower plate here, those come out first. Set them aside. Some do have washers under them as well to allow for a little adjustability in that hole. Make sure you set the washers aside as well. If you're not going to If you don't have washers, obviously you won't need to set them aside there. Okay, so now we have our press. We're going to take our press out of our cabinet next. A couple things to note. Be careful on your arrow when you're grabbing things. The selector arrow. On the older machines, they were metal. Now they're an acrylic. So you don't want to grab or press or squeeze too hard on that by any means, or it could break. All right, so now up from underneath inside the press base here on our newer models, probably going back about 5 years, they'll have access holes that go through the base in there. So I use a drill for this with a Allen head 5/16 and an extension that lets me get right up inside here and access these mounting bolts, and back goes right out. From underneath, there's the 4 of them. When these do break loose, when the last one breaks loose, the machine can tip forward a little bit. So you may just want to keep a hand on the machine so it doesn't tip forward. Now you have those 4 bolts loose. The machine's sitting good, so we don't have to worry about it. Okay, so the 4 bolts are out. Now one thing to note on our newer machines that are paid, there's going to be another guard right inside here, right in the front. And that guard is just held on by a little bit of clear tape. So I'm just going to push with my thumb and pull this guard out of the way. Okay, we'll set that off to the side for now. That just, what it does is it blocks on our paid presses so the quarters can't come out of this. There's a notch out inside on the mounts, and that notch out is for machines that actually have our noisy clicker brake. This one does not have the noisy clicker brake. And because it doesn't have the noisy clicker brake, it is a little easier to lift out of here. I'll show you that clicker in just a minute in case yours doesn't have it. But the next step now, we can just lift the press right on out of the cabinet. And we're going to set it over here on our sturdy workbench. Definitely recommend a nice sturdy workbench for doing this. Set it there. That's where we'll take it apart. At this point, the cabinet can be kind of pushed off to the side, and we're going to work on the machine on the bench here. Okay, now we're going to swap out the dies. Have it on a bench here. I'm going to walk you through kind of the next steps on what we do. See, we're sitting pretty crooked here, so what I like to do is grab a board, a bigger board, maybe a 2x6, 2x8 if you have it. Set the machine on that, but it doesn't want to tip all over the place. And then secondly, a die ring works pretty good. You can set it right under the crank handle. Now your machine's not going to tip as you're trying to work on it. Taking this upper gear off is going to be our next step. You get that out of the way, and that way you can get in here to access the die ring, also to access the selector gear. So now that's going to be a 1/4 inch drive. I like to use a little extension on it to get into this bolt. These are torqued to 24 foot-pounds, as well as these end frame bolts are torqued to 24 foot-pounds. So when you take them off, you are going to have to hold on good, and you break them loose. Do break them both loose before you try to take one all the way out. And then you can remove them both. These are shoulder bolts. They're a little bit longer, so take a minute to get out. Oops. And once you get these out, this whole entire upper gear will lift right off. There's really no major alignment with that gear other than just making sure everything is seated when it gets put back on. I'll set this off to the side for now. Okay, now the machine's a lot less tippy. Not going to want to fall over on you as much. So the next step to getting into the press here, we're going to take out these 4 end Allen head bolts. They're 5/16, 2, 3, 4. You can take those out, again, using a ratchet. They are torqued to 24 foot-pounds, so it'll be a little harder to take off, especially if you don't have a ratchet. And it is probably easier if you push down towards the table to take those off. Okay, now that I have them all broken loose, I'm going to, just for speed, use my drill with my 5/16 here. And take these 4 bolts out. And that's getting our end plate out of the way. All right, now this end plate is off. You'll notice a difference if you do have our noisy clicker brake. That'll be bolted on right here. It'll run against the gear, and these 2 bolt holes will be filled with 2 bolt heads, like you see there and there. Obviously, now you don't need to remove those for anything. If you have the noisy clicker brake, you leave it right on for this process and just set this plate off to the side, with or without the clicker brake. Okay, now we're into our press. So now we have access to the inside. I'm going to get down here and do a little shot of the lineup to show you kind of how this should be lined up on the inside. When you go to take the press apart at this point, I strongly recommended to pay attention to kind of to where everything is. Inside here there's a spacer washer. On our newer models there may be 2, a thinner and a thicker spacer washer. There's a gear, your die ring, and your timing lobe, we call it. This is what times the drop of the coin. So as the gear turns, it's only going to turn to the right here. As it turns, that door gets closed on our drop mechanism and opened by that timing mechanism, by that timing lobe. And each time it turns, it's going to open and close and drop a penny. It's crucial the placement of this lobe when you put it in, when you put this back together. And I'll show you that a little bit more. What's also crucial is the alignment of the front to the back dies. They need to align so that they're both at the top center, so when they roll together, the two images press together and are aligned front to back. I'm going to go through as well where the keyway is in the die. What the keyway is that cutout in relation to the image, and how we're going to set that up on the machine with our timing lobe. If you have a 4-image or a 5-image die, it is slightly different. So again, I'll go over that here in a minute. At this point, you can remove this device. This is the coin drop mechanism. Note you don't need to remove it if you are only changing the front die, but I am going to show the process for changing the front and the back die in this video. Okay, now we're going to continue our process here. The next item to remove here is what's called our pressure block. This is just a slide fit on these frame slides. Take that out, set it to the side. You want to be very careful with everything you take out. Okay, now in regards to the image placement on the die, you'll see the image with the wings is in the 90-degree or upwards position. At that time, our selector gear is showing the image just right about there, close to the middle or slightly past the middle. Again, pay attention to that when we put it back together, so it'll make it easier for sticking on our new decal. All right, we're going to pull out our previous die ring, and now at this point I'm going to set this aside so we can get in to do it to our back die ring. If you are just changing the front die ring, you do not need to remove any of these next items I'm going to show. As mentioned, at this point we'll need to take out our timing mechanism. That is a 3/16 Allen wrench. Break that loose. You'll take this out and you'll set it to the side, but again I want to note this arm on here, the drop arm, is facing the back of the press for when you put it back in. It rubs against the lobes or the white side, not against the gears. Okay, we'll set that to the side. Alright, at this point you're going to look inside there and you're going to see there are some other items going on. There's these scrapers underneath that scrape the coin off the die if it sticks. They also scrape a little gunk off if it sticks on the die. On our newer machines, there's a guard in there we put in for the quarters. This prevents the quarters from bouncing around inside and coming out the wrong chute. These items will all need to be moved. The guard will be removed. These two scrapers will just be loosened and drop down for you to slide the whole back die out if you are changing your back die. So at this point, I'm going to do that real quick. You can flip this over easily. You can access the bottom. This guard we put on with some really good tape. Sometimes it may break like that one did. If it does, we will include a new one with the kit we send you for swapping the die. Okay, so that one broke. We're going to grab a new one here. Now the new one, when we put it back in, it'll get stuck on right in that same place. If that does happen, you'll have to remove the double stick tape that was there. You can use a razor blade and that'll scrape off pretty easily. And then at this point, there is still some gunk left on there. For this on the frame, you can use a goof off type remover to get that gunk off, or an alcohol or any goo remover, so you have a clean surface to mount your new scraper or new guard back on when you put it back together. Now we're just going to break our scrapers loose to get to our back die here. Again, this is a good thing to use your Allen wrench for because these are torqued. And then hold the other one when you break it loose as well with your 5/8 wrench. Okay, and those are both broken loose. You can just tip them down. You don't really need to remove them. But what that does is allows you to get in there and slide this whole die back out of there. Okay, now I'm going to flip this back over. And at this point, we're going to slide this out of the way. Set that down. And now we have our press frame here just by itself. Okay, this can get set to the side for a minute. We're going to look at this assembly here. To get to our back die, you will remove this pressure or this block, bearing block. And in order to get to that, we have a bolt head here, an Allen bolt. Break that loose. That has a little bit of Loctite on it, real lightweight, so it might be just a little hard to break loose, but it should come loose. It's pretty easy to do. Okay, now washer comes off, the bolt comes off, and now at this point you can slide out your bearing. This is a bearing block. This is a spacer, just a white spacer, and okay, now we have our back die ring off. Now the back die ring, when you put it, we're going to get pretend we're getting a new one here. We're going to put it back on. The key has fallen out of the shaft here, so you'll put that back in. You'll make sure your back gear is on, just as it was. And in case this comes all the way apart, you'll notice there's a spacer here, a white spacer. The white spacer goes against the bearing block. Some machines, depending on the spacing in them, might have 2 of those spacers. If they do, this thinner one goes to the inside there. Okay, now your gear, or I'm sorry, put in your key. And then your gear goes back on. When your die ring, your back ring goes in, you'll notice there's a keyway here and there's an image. The image is very close to that keyway, and the top of the image is facing up in my hand right now. That's the way it's going to go onto the die. So you're going to put the front of the keyway, front of the image here, and at this point, the top of the image is this way, the bottom of the image is this way as far as the writing goes, and our keyway is right at the front of this image. That's going to be very important for when we reline back up on the inside. Now make sure your key, again, is still in your gear. Mine slid out there a little bit, so push that back together. Okay, keys in the gear, our die's on with the top part of the image this way, bottom this way. Now our spacer is going to go back on, and our bearing housing. Okay, now at this point you can put your washer back on and your bolt back on, and that ensures this won't fall apart on you when you try to move it around. And the newer ones, these bolts will be silver. It's the same bolt, it's just a silver version versus black. Okay, now we're all back together there. We're going to just set this again to the side here for a second. At this point, we're going to swap our front die images back out. So on our front die now, when we're going to swap this, again, remember, pay attention to how it's assembled initially, because you are going to be taking this apart now. So we're going to take off our bearing housing. Next, we're going to take off our timing lobe. Now you'll see there's a keyed part on the lobe. you want to pay strong attention to where that is keyed. So let's turn it up to the image it's keyed against. Okay, so the keyway is here, the lobe is behind it. What that does is it puts that lobe towards the center of the image. In the 4 image dies, that lobe, see if you put it on the wrong way, now it's in the middle. That's incorrect. If you have it on the correct way, puts the lobe towards the middle of the die, not in between them. So you want it more towards the middle of the die there. All right. On our newer models as well, we've marked the correct keyway in green. We did have a different keyway cut for a different size coin in those, so make sure you use the one that's in green. That will, again, it'll align the image much closer with the center of the die. So if it's a little towards the front or towards the center, that's where you want it. You don't want it pushed back at all behind the image or in between. If it is behind or in between, you have this on the wrong way, or you may have it on the wrong key location. We use different key locations depending on coin size. Okay, so now I'm going to take off the old die ring. I'm going to grab my new die ring with images on it. That's not it. This is the right one with the images on it. We're going to put it on here. Okay, now we're going to get this back together. We'll use the same timing lobe that was in this machine. So we'll slide that back on, lobe in the center of the image. We're going to put our bearing housing back on. Okay, we can set this to the side for a minute. At this point, we're going to get our machine put back together. So we grab our press frame, set that back on our block here. At this point, we can put our dies back in for the back die. Slide that in here. When you put this in, one thing I do want to show you. We're going to just go ahead and take this back out real fast. So when I mention the keyway, you'll see the keyway right here. That keyway is in front of a certain back image. When we put these back together, we want to orientate it so that the dies are going to roll together in the right orientation. We want to orientate it so our keyway that we're using, the image that's right behind that keyway, rolls against the image that's right behind this keyway. So when these go back together, essentially the 2 keyways will roll and touch or face each other as they go through the die. So when you are putting your back die back in, just pay attention to which one of these back images here is right in adjacent to the keyway. Okay, so I have that image facing up. Another good way to remember that is pay attention to which image currently is on the selector gear facing up. Right now we have this Peterson image there. So as long as I keep that in the upward position, I know I have my what we call the number 1 position back die in its right spot. Okay, now we can slide this back together. So you line up your 2 housings inside the slides of the frame and just push those in. Again, be careful with your arrow over here. You don't want to break that. Remember now I have my Peterson image facing up. At this point, that means my keyway is right here. Okay, now we have our front die. We can put this back together again. We have our image that's just behind our keyway here. Slide that in. And as long as that image is facing up and your other back image is facing up, those 2 are going to line together as the press comes around. If you do have those one gear or key off, it may be a little forward, a little backwards, you'll need to adjust that there. Okay, now I can slide my pressure block back in. And at this point our end plate's going to be able to go back on. You don't want to forget as well, like I did here, we're going to put our washer and our bolt back in our back die shaft. Again, that's only something you're doing if you're removing the back die. Okay, make sure that's tight. All right, and with this point, we have our dies back in. We're timed correctly with our front to back and our timing lobe. So the next step, we're going to put our end plate back on here. Use your 4 5/16 bolts. And then I use the drill for speed. Make sure everything's sitting flat and square when you do this, when you tighten it up. You want to be square on your block. And now those bolts are going to get torqued to 24 foot-pounds. So I'm going to need to put a torque wrench on this and pull down. Again, if you have the old die ring handy, it's easy to set right under there so you can torque down against it or another board. We're going to grab our torque wrench. We're going to make sure we're set to 24 foot-pounds. That's going to be your key number when you do any of these torque settings on here. Okay, now we'll torque this back down. Okay, now your end plate's torqued back on. And set your torque wrench to the side. You won't need it again until you put your top block back on in a minute here. However, before we do that, we're going to want to change our selector gear decal next. This decal here, obviously if you're changing out your front die, you'll need to put a new one on. If it's your first time doing this, and if for some reason we didn't cut this out for you, I just cut that with a razor blade in the middle there, and cut it out as a circle before I peeled the adhesive off. The reason I do that, it allows you, as the person putting this together, to try this. Put it on, make sure you have it in the right position for when it's going to drop the coin before you stick it onto the gear. These gear decals can be very hard to remove from the old gears as well, so I would recommend just leaving the old one on and sticking it in its place. If you do get a little bit of grease on there like I did while you're doing your assembly, take some rubbing alcohol here and you can clean it off. Okay, now as long as there's no grease, this new decal can go right over the old one, or if you want to peel it off you can, but then it may require something a little more aggressive to get the residue off that it'll leave. Okay, so now as we mentioned, or as we kind of showed before, the timing on the inside here of when it's going to drop which coin is determined by when the coin goes by our drop mechanism. So in order to get this correct, see right now we have the Minnesota image that's on this selector gear on our new one facing in the upwards position. So we're going to put our drop mechanism back in because I want to show you this. You don't necessarily have to do this right now, but this will show you that when that timing is crucial. So with that mechanism in, you can see here we have our Minnesota image in the upwards position. When we put our new gear on, that Minnesota image is going to be pretty darn close to the center, or just off the center of our selector arrow. So for trial, let's use it like this before we take our adhesive off. We can stick it on just like that. Maybe to hold it in place, you can use a little piece of tape, or peel a little of the adhesive, but just as a test trial. Now our Minnesota image is in the center. Okay, now turn this back around for you. As our lobe triggers our arm, it'll close this door. Once this door gets into its closed position, we're no longer going to get the Minnesota image, we're going to get the next image. So let's turn this. We can see that right inside there, in that hole, you'll see this little arm closes this slot off. That's when it's dropping our Minnesota image. So if we go back to the front right now, we can see we wouldn't quite be right on our timing, because right now what that would do, it would give us our Minnesota image a little too long. So we want to turn this so that when that door is closed, you're right on the red line of the next image. Okay, so now we're going to get our Minnesota image till here, and then it is going to give us our next image. So as we turn again, now we go through our Minnesota image, and now anybody that drops a coin in at this point is getting the next image that comes up. And you'll see that here on the front. We've turned to this point, it would have already dropped the coin, and now we're showing it here. We're at our line to go to our next image. Okay, as long as you have that in the right spot, you can go ahead and stick your gear decal right on. An easy way to do that here, if you want to keep your timing, put your piece of tape right at that line. Now you'll know where that timing was. Peel your decal off. Keep it orientated the same way. And we're going to stick it back on right here. Now you really get one shot at this. So this, you want to make sure you get it orientated right. Stick that on, our door is closed. Okay, so we should get this image until now, and then we'll go on, we'll be getting our next image. Here you'll run over that, press your decal down. Okay, now your new decal's on. You can get rid of our tape. Slide this off to the side, and you're timed correctly. Okay, at this point, we can put our upper gear back on. One thing I want to note, well actually no, we're not going to do that quite yet, because at this point we want to put go back to the underneath side of the press, and we're going to put our scrapers back in their positions where they rub against the die rings. We're going to hold those with our wrench, tighten them from the outside with our torque wrench, and then we're going to put our deflector guard back on in there if you have a machine that's quarter pay. So I'll do those items real quick here. It's easy to hold these scrapers with your 5/8 wrench. You can use your just regular Allen key to do this, and just put a slight pressure with the scraper against the die ring. And then the same on the other one. Just slight pressure against the die ring. They don't need to scrape hard. They're just barely scraping, just so they can knock anything or any coin off that sticks. And now at this point, you can grab your torque wrench, hold your wrench on here so it doesn't move much. Torque those back down. That one. Torque those back down. Okay, now we're going to get our rest of our residue off here from our tape. You could have done this before, but I waited till now. And you want to make sure to get that all out of the way so that the new one sticks good. Looks like we are good there. Okay. Again, on the press frame parts, you can use something real strong to get adhesives off. You don't want to do that on the acrylic. Okay, now we're going to stick our new guard back in. This does not apply if you have a free press machine, free play machine with no quarters. These guards don't need to be on there because we're not blocking for any quarters. Okay, and this just simply sticks right in, just butts up next to the scraper, sticks onto the inside there. Just keep it flush with the bottom of the press. Okay, and that just keeps the quarters going down the quarter chute. All right, at this point, we'll set it back up on the bench. We can set our crank handle up on something because we're going to put our upper gear back on and it's going to get a little tippy again. All right, set our upper gear back on. Again, nothing crucial about this other than you just want to make sure the gear teeth seat. Get our 1/4 inch drive or our 1/4 inch Allen socket again. And we'll want to start them both before you fully tighten either of them. Now these also get torqued. So you need your 1/4 inch on your torque wrench. Hold the press frame. Torque them both down. Okay, now you are essentially back together. Make sure you double check your gear at this point to make sure you didn't get it too greasy again. If you did, like I got a little bit there, grab our rubbing alcohol rag. Rubbing alcohol is safe on these to get any of that grease off. Okay. Keep going, we'll double check. Looks like we're pretty clean. There's a little more there. Okay, now our press is ready to go back in. If we are going to adjust our coin pressure, we'll do that in the cabinet. If the coins don't roll the same as they did with your previous die. All right, I'll set this back in our cabinet now. And at this point, we're just about done and back together. All right, I'm just about ready to set this back into the press cabinet now. Just want to show you a couple quick things. If you do have a machine with a silent brake, so it doesn't have this noisy clicker brake on it that we showed you earlier, in this little carved out slot in here, you would have found a different type of guard. If you need to put that back in, it just drops in that slot like you see there, and then the bolt goes through that hole. That blocks this front area, just like our other guard does on our noisy brake machines. Okay, drop it back in. Again, this one, since it is silent, I'll use this type of guard on. I had the other type of guard in there to show you initially. Okay, now we'll put our bolts back up through from the bottom. Again, for this, I find the easiest to be my power tool. Just make sure you get this lined up. And the next one. I went a little too tight there. Leave them a little loose until you get all 4 in. And again, if you do have this style machine where it has that little guard I talked about, you need to make sure that gets lined up so the bolt goes through it. You may just need to reach in front with your finger and slide it one way or the other. Okay, now we are all the way tight on that one. Double check this front one. And then you can give those a little turn with the Allen wrench just to make sure the press doesn't move at all if the drill didn't get them tight. Alright, those are in. Now if you do have a press with the noisy clicker brake, at this point you'll take your plastic guard we talked about, slide it in, and stick it back down. If you need to use new tape for that, we recommend a clear double stick tape for that because you will see it. Okay, at this point our press is back in our cabinet. We can put our acrylic chute back on. When you do put this on, some of them have a slightly larger hole. There's a little adjustment in them. Make sure you slide it forward or backward so that the slots line up and a penny falls freely through. It'll line up pretty close to the end of this plate. Some are pushed in a little from there, some are out. Again, that's why there's the adjustability on those with the larger bolt holes and washers. This one doesn't get washers because it has a little bit tighter alignment on that. Okay, put that back in with our 5/16 Allen head bolts. Looks like our slot is aligned. I'm going to tighten those back down. And then when I do this, the next thing, just drop a penny in there right now. And that way you'll know if these slots are aligned. Alright, so it dropped right through, it didn't pinch. If it stops right here, that means this needs to be adjusted one way or the other. Okay, so at this point, we're pretty close to trying the press again. Okay, so our spacer washer I talked about did come off of the front there, broke loose, so stack that back in. Now at this point, we're going to put our handle hub back on with our 3/8 Allen wrench. Okay. Alright, we'll grab our cone, put that back on here, grab our handle, and our small socket head 9/64 bolts will go in to finish this off. Again, with any of these bolts, when there's more than one going in, start all 4 of them first. Make sure they get a chance to start in the hole, and then you can put your final ones in and tighten everything back up. Alright, so we have that there. As you can see, our Minnesota image is the next one coming up on our selector wheel. So let's go ahead, we'll try this. Put our 2 quarters and our 1 penny in. Okay, drop them down. Turn our crank. And we got our Minnesota image. So we had it correctly aligned when we put our decal on. Alright, that's the majority of what I have to show you. I did use a few different cleaners. Alcohol is okay to use on any of the machine frame parts or anything metal. Goof off, the same thing, any of the frame parts, anything metal. If you're working on the acrylic, trying to get things off, use a Goo Gone or the recommended acrylic cleaner Novus products. And that's what's good for cleaning the cabinet. I'll show you one more thing here, and that's just adjusting the pressure or the length of the coin. After we got done there, my coins were a little too long, and that means my pressure set a little too far or a little too hard on the press. In order to reduce the pressure, this bolt will get turned to the left. If you wanted to increase the pressure, the bolt will get turned to the right. In order to get inside there, first we'll take out our chute. I already loosened the bolts. The reason we take our chute out is because, like you see the lock nut here on the outside, there's also a lock nut on the inside of this plate. We'll have to break both of those loose in order to change our pressure adjustment. The lock nut on the outside of the plate, hold the lock nut, hold the bolt. This nut will turn down to loosen. The one on the inside will turn up to loosen. You'll see it is a little bit of a challenge to get the wrench in there for the inside one. But with the right finagling, you'll get it in, be able to turn it up to break it loose. Or if you do have access to a shorter combination wrench, that can be easier. Okay, at this point, our pressure bolt is ready to be turned. So you can turn it, just back off pressure a little bit, and then snug up that lock nut with your hand. Now at this point, hold your pressure bolt again with your 1-inch wrench, now that you've reduced the pressure a little bit, and take your 1 1/8 inch wrench and tighten up your lock nut. And do the same to the lock nut on the inside. Hold the bolt and tighten the lock nut on the inside back. Okay, now those are back to tight. At this point, you can put your chute back in and make sure you align your slots and tighten your bolts back down. Okay, again, if you're loosening pressure, you'll turn to the left. Tightening the pressure, making it a little longer, you turn it to the right. All right, thanks again. Let me know with any questions.